podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and the Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello everyone. The England men's and women's cricket teams are aiming to win back their respective Ashes this summer. In today's episode, I was joined by a player who has just won the Ashes, England's over-70s all-rounder Nick Andrews. And to get both sides of the story, you will also be hearing from New South Wales bowler Paul Cullen, who played in the three-match series Down Under. Hello, Nick. Thanks for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Pleasure.
How are you?
Oh, never better.
You should be feeling well. You've just won the Ashes. What's it like to be on a winning Ashes team?
Stephen, it's quite hard to sort of put into words, really, and perhaps only be a little bit later when you reflect on it and look back that you realise what a fantastic achievement it was, and how proud I should be of what not just me but what we've all achieved down there. And best time ever, really. It was the best cricketing experience of my life, and as you probably gather, I've been playing for about 60 years, so that I guess that says something in itself.
So was it the first time you've won the Ashes? I don't normally get to ask this question to people.
Yeah, I first played an Ashes game in 2012 for the over 60s, and it was the last game of the home series, and I didn't really know anyone, and so I was pitched into it, and I did well, had a really good game in that, and it was, I think the Ashes was already won then, but I wasn't really invested in it. I didn't sort of, couldn't relate quite the same as when you're on tour and you're with a group of guys who you become quite tight with, and kind of invest into the series, and it means so much more somehow than that first game did.
Did it mean more because you lost the first match of the series?
I guess it did. That made it special because we had high hopes when we went out there that we'd do well, and the first game was I think our fourth game of the trip, of which all were in searing temperatures, and we're not using that as an excuse, but we lost that first game and didn't play especially well, and that was disappointing. And we sat down afterwards and said, well, look, we've got to win the last two, otherwise the tour's a bit of a washout and a disappointment. And we continued to play pretty well in the state games and the other matches, and we really stepped up for the last two and won them pretty convincingly, really.
We'll come on to those all the matches later, but you mentioned there that you've been playing cricket for, I think you said 60 years, but I just want to get a bit about your background of cricket. I know some of it myself, but for the listeners, when did you start playing cricket?
Probably about 10 or 11, like a lot of guys at my age, around about that time. Saturday afternoon, your dad played. Didn't have anything else to do. I'd always turn up. I'd start scoring when I was about 9 or 10, and then inevitably someone would drop out on the morning of the game, and I'd always got my boots in the car, and you'd get a game or two like that, and then next year you get one or two more games, and then when I was about 12, 13, I was playing fairly regularly at not a great standard, but men's second team cricket. So that's how it started, really.
And where have you played your club and county cricket?
Right. Well, I started off playing down in Buckinghamshire. Played for two clubs, Amersham and Amersham on the Hill. I then moved up to Peterborough when I got married in 1974 and joined Peterborough Town. I had 12 good years with them, but times move on, and I had a young family and decided to up sticks and move to Market Deeping Cricket Club, which was about 8 miles from where we lived in Peterborough, and very family orientated club, and made me feel very welcome. And all of a sudden 37 years has gone past since I started playing there, and I've loved every minute of it, really.
Well, some people would say, why are you still playing cricket over 70?
That's a really good question. I've just refused to stop. I mean, there's a lot of people, such as myself. I'm not the only one. We just love the game so much, and very, very lucky to have remained fit. I've not had any really bad injuries that have sort of prevented me from playing for long periods of time. Always enjoyed it. And with the when I got to 50, I was eligible for county over 50s cricket, and that went on to over 60s cricket. And I found I was quite suited to that. I was never been a sort of fantastic club player, quite a steady, useful club cricketer at best, but quite handy. And someone said to me the other day, "You haven't got any worse," which I'm not quite sure how to take that, but I think it was a bit of a compliment. And I guess I sort of carried on and still able to compete and keep going. I've always said that once I start embarrassing myself, once I start feeling that I'm not contributing towards the team, and this is more salient for club cricket than age cricket, because we're all sort of old duffers in it to some degree there. But for club cricket, I think it's important that, I don't make a fool of myself. I don't want to be laughed at behind my back. And I know I'm not, because all the young lads that I play with rip the waz out of me somewhat rotten, which I think is a good thing, because if they're doing it behind your back, they're not doing it to your face. And that's not quite what I wanted. So I've got a good relationship. I play with the young guys at the club. They seem to accept me and appreciate what I do. And I still chip in, I still get 1 or 2 runs, still sort of bowl me overs fairly economically. And the hardest part is in the field. That is where I really sort of struggle, and where a lot of people have said exactly the same thing, especially playing with younger players. And that's just one of the facts of life. But you try and do what you can, stop the ball and just do your best. And that's what I've been doing, and that's what I continue to do, Stephen.
How do you keep fit? Do you do yoga, Pilates? Do you run?
Well,
go to the gym?
I had a sedentary job for a number of years, and I think must have been about 25, 28 years ago. I just pulled a muscle in my back, doing nothing at all, just kind of picking something off the floor. And I thought, well, that's not right. I shouldn't be able to do that. So I got over that, and I got a little bit interested in why you get injuries and sort of what causes it. And so I decided to just try and not join a gym or go running or anything like that, but just doing exercises, keep my core muscles sort of as good as they can, and stretch a bit, and just nothing sort of too profound or too heavy, but just regular stuff just to keep myself ticking over. And I've always been a big believer that it's easier to stay relatively fit than it is to have sort of peaks and troughs of getting really unfit and then having to haul yourself up and get fit again. So even sort of during the winter or when I'm not playing cricket, I try and sort of tick over and keep myself in reasonable sort of nick, so that when I start cricketing again in the spring, that muscles aren't screaming out at me, and after the first net, I don't want to be sort of not able to move for 3 days. And luckily that's not happened. I've been able to sort of remain sort of fairly mobile and flexible, and obviously that's sort of helped my longevity playing the game.
It must have. And senior cricket is really thriving. England have got an over 50s and over 60s and over 70s team. We haven't got an over 80s team. And my reliable source, a good friend of yours and mine, Pat Ringham, says that we've got 22 over 70s teams. I think this is county teams in the country.
Very much so. It is a thriving sport. I'm not alone. People keep playing and they keep enjoying it. And the older you get, it's not just the playing, it's the camaraderie, it's sort of being in a dressing room, it's having a bit of a laugh, a bit of a crack. You can have a sort of bit of socialising afterwards. The guys you play against are people that probably we've played with and against for 20, 30 years. And so you've got a good relationship with them. And, you just like to turn up and play. The minute you don't play, the minute you stop, you're not in the dressing room anymore. You just lose something. And people are desperate not to lose that thing, which I can't really put my finger on, but it's just something that drives us.
Well, I posed the same question to Paul Cullen, our other guest, and this is what he had to say about playing cricket in his 70s.
Well, I've always loved the game. I've still got my cap from the first when I was first picked for my school, and it's disintegrating now. It's lost the properties of a solid, actually, but I've still got that, and I've just had a love affair with the game for 62 years now, and I couldn't imagine not playing it, to be quite honest with you. It's done wonders for me personally. I've made such lifelong friends with it, and the cricket fraternity, Stephen, is like no other. Cricket's the type of game where you can be competitive, but there's enough sedentary opportunity to sit and chat and to talk about life experiences, and it's just life enriching for me.
Oh, that's what it's all about, cricket, isn't it? And what about fitness levels for the over 70s?
Yes, well, I've never had an injury, to be quite honest. I've been lucky that way, fit, and I'm still pretty fit, and I can still run around not like I was when I was 18, but I'm fit enough. Yeah, it's good.
And is the seniors game thriving in Australia?
It is. It's the fastest growing sector of cricket in Australia, veterans cricket. And believe it or not, 75s is the big growth area. Over 75s.
So you're still not in your prime yet then, are you?
No, I'm looking forward to 75s. And there's something we can aspire to.
When did you first get selected for England?
Well, I think I mentioned a little while ago, I was selected to play for the over 60s 10, 11 years ago, which kind of, not say kept me in the frame, but people were aware that I was still playing cricket, and obviously aware that when I got to 70 that I qualified for the 70s. And I was invited to go for a trial, one of several matches that were organised during 2021. And there must have been about 30 odd 40 players who were recommended by their counties, and there were a number of games organised on a regional basis. And I had a game at the Great Oakley near Corby in September at the end of the year, and did quite well in that. And then was invited for a game in middle of April last year down in Surrey against the over 70s county championships for kind of an England 11, and that was a bit of a disaster. It was cold, and I don't think the captain knew that I batted. I was batting at 10 and bowled in cold sort of weather. Anyway, it was a bit of a disaster, and I thought, oh well, I was rubbish, so I might not hear anything more about that. And then I got an email saying that I've been selected for another trial game up in Stourport in Worcestershire, and played in that and did quite well. And then I got selected for the one international last year, a game against Wales that was played in the most scorching, it was the hottest day of the year, it was about 37 degrees. It was torturous. And luckily we steamrolled Wales, and I didn't get a chance to bat, but bowled fairly tightly. And that was the selection process. And following that game, they selected a squad of 17 players to tour to Australia last month, and luckily I was one of the 17, and couldn't have been more pleased, really.
And you play for Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire over 70s, don't you?
That's right. Yes, yeah. I've had 2 seasons playing there now, and I have to say, the first season didn't do very well at all, and a little bit concerned that I might not last the pace and get my feet under the England table, but did quite well last year, and loving playing over 70s cricket now.
And the tour, it was all self-funded, wasn't it? The ECB don't pay for the England over 70s.
No, we don't come under the auspices of the ECB. We've got our own sort of governing body, if you like, and the ECB have not shown any interest in getting under over 60s or over 70s under their banner. So yes, any tours are very much self-funded. We did raise some sponsorship money before the tour, so we got over £12,000 between us, producing a team or tour brochure, which we sold advertising space and produced several copies, or a lot of copies, which we took out with us. And I say that raised some money, but that really was a drop in the ocean. That just went towards travelling costs whilst we were out there, and meals after the game, and little sort of bits and pieces that they weren't necessarily sort of catered for beforehand. So that sort of helped us, or prevented us being asked every couple of days, we need another $100 for this, or need a bit more for that. That did help that. And I think we're due to get a refund of about £130 in the near future. So that'll be nice as well. But at the end of the day, yes, we had to self-fund, and just glad to do it. No one at all resented it or thought it was poor show and didn't want to do it. We accepted it and what we got back in return was a really good return on our investments.
And you played 3 50-over ODIs. Where did you play? You said it was very hot.
Yeah, we started the tour in Queensland, and just north of Brisbane, and we played 3 warm-up games there. And then we moved down and we played the first ODI actually in Brisbane itself. And the temperatures were in the kind of about 32, 33. And, even the Australian guys were sort of complaining how hot it was as well. So it wasn't just us whinging about it. It was seriously warm. And we picked, I wasn't involved in it, but the selection committee, of which there were 5, picked the side, and I was absolutely delighted to be in it. I thought I'd done enough in the first sort of couple of games that I played to warrant selection, and I got in. And we didn't play that well in the first game. We batted first, and the wicket, whilst it looked an absolute belter, it was very slow and difficult, and the Australians bowled quite well indeed, and we were always 20-30 runs short of what we should have got. And they won sort of fairly comfortably with only about an over and a half, 2 overs to spare, but plenty of wickets, and it was a pretty comfortable win, if truth be told. And we realised we needed to up our game for the second match. There were 1 or 2 changes made, and we played really well. We scored 220 odd, I think it was. And again, we bowled really tidily. I was very, very satisfied with my own bowling performance. I think I took 1 for about sort of 22, 23, something like that in 10 overs coming on as first change. And we just strangled them, and they showed very little intent to score quickly. And we won by over 100 runs in the end. It was a bit, I won't say too easy, but it was a very comprehensive victory.
Yeah, so did the wickets suit your bowling?
No, not at all. I learned quite a bit from when I went out there 7 years ago. I didn't bowl well. My type of bowling in England was more sort of suited to English wickets with a little bit of movement and everything, but didn't get any out there. We played with these old Kookaburra balls, and the grounds were flat and like concrete. And they just kind of treated me sort of, not with disdain, but they scored comfortably. And I didn't get a wicket until the last game of the tour. So, wasn't really worth my place in the side as an all-rounder. So this year I sort of changed my approach, knowing that the wickets would be the same. So I did a bit more sort of cross-seam. I just changed my pace a little bit more and tried to improve my accuracy. And for some reason, the Australians didn't want to score runs off me. I had a sort of a good spell in the first game, and they kind of just thought they'd see me off for some reason. I wasn't doing much with the ball. If someone would have just come down there, put their foot down the wicket and smacked me over my head a couple of times, I'd have been scratching my head wondering what to do. But thankfully they didn't do that. And, I managed to sort of play in all 3 games and bowled my 10 overs each time, and didn't really get any stick whatsoever, which was very, very, very pleasing.
Well, you lost the first game by 6 wickets. And as you say, in the second game, you won by 102 runs.
Yeah, I'd say very comfortable.
23 for 8 in the second game.
Yeah, indeed. And we won our remaining sort of tour games leading up to the final test in Melbourne. And, we realised that was, last game of the tour, Ashes on the line. I mean, what could be better? I mean, we were dreading the fact that we might have been 2-0 down and, it would have been a really anticlimax. So, we were really up for it. And there was quite a bit of nerves about, who was going to play in the last game. Everyone was desperate to play. And the management committee convened a meeting on the morning before the game in the hotel. They wanted to have a chat with everybody. And it was we've got hard decisions to make. Everyone's done really well. Only 12 people are going to be in the team. There's going to be some disappointments. Everyone's thinking, oh, crikey, who's going to sort of suffer here? And they started to read the side out. And, I was fairly comfortable that I was going to play.
Alphabetical order. You should be near the top.
Yeah, I think I did it in batting order, actually, not alphabetical order. Anyway, it got to my name. And, I was in. But, one or two of the guys who didn't make it, opening bat and opening bowler, who played in the first ODI and were, for all intents and purposes, nailed on for the series. They did really well in the trial games and the warm-ups, and first choice on the team list. But they didn't really perform very well during the game, and struggled a bit. And as a result, they didn't get in the last two games, and it's a bit hard on them, but I guess the decisions by the selectors were sort of vilified and not vilified, but justified.
Vindicated, yeah.
That as well, even.
Yeah.
And we won those last two games fairly comfortably. The last game at Melbourne, we actually won the toss and did what we don't normally do, is put the side in. There was a little bit of overcast conditions about, and it promised to be hot and steamy a bit later on. So our skipper said, right, we'll bowl in these cloudy conditions for a while, and we did. And yet again, they didn't sort of. I think they were about 75 off about 30 overs, and going nowhere, and struggled and got 150 odd, I think, in the end. And we lost a couple of early wickets, and then the two lads from Kent, Derek and Swally, the skipper, just knocked off 100 and something for the third wicket, and one with about 7 overs to spare, I think, something like that, and fairly comfortable again, and that was it. Happy days.
Well, let's hear from one of the vanquished, Paul Cullen, what he had to say about the 3-match series.
Yes, well, I actually wrote down my thoughts and my reflections and sent them to the national president. I was just absolutely in admiration of the English standard of game. It was a complete game. They had a match plan, they had fitness, they had line and length bowling, relentless line and length bowling, and partnerships, Stephen. The partnerships, Derek Tao, Chris Swadkin, John Hall, they never let the run rate get below 4.2. It went to 2.6 in the first one. I think they were acclimatising in the first one. They bowled 22 wides, which is so atypical of England. 22 wides, it just doesn't happen. And they lost on the strength of one innings by the captain, Tom Wood, who got 90, I think, pretty near 90. But that was an aberration. The other two games were comprehensive victories, and I put it down to superior fitness and also a definite match plan. And plus the fact that you're a small country, you've got a very, very, how shall I say it, you've got a good competition that is in radius of each other, no more games than 2 hours away. Our nationals and state are vast distances. Like next year it's in Perth. It's going to, 10,000 miles from anywhere. So these sort of things give England an advantage because you're just battle hardened by the time you play ODIs, whereas we don't play enough. Our veterans do not play enough cricket to be at that highest level of competition in ODI internationals. So that's the thought.
And you played in the second ODI.
I did, yes. Yeah.
And how big a thrill is it to play for your country?
It is, and this was a bigger thrill at cap number 80 for 70s. I got my first cap in 2012 60s at 44, but there's now so many more people eligible for 70s. But the thrill was the same, Stephen. It was just it's a wonderful thing. It's an experience I'll never forget.
We talked off air, Nick. Was there some edge? England playing against Australia, the Ashes on the line. Was it different playing against Australia?
Yes, it was a bit different. We're all very conscious of the history of England via Australia, whether it's the main sort of first-class Test side or whether it's us old duffers playing. There's still an intent and a want to do well, and especially in the touring side. I think I might have mentioned earlier, we're quite a tight group. We really wanted to do this. And, on the other hand, I know that the Australians, and I'm sure Paul will say the same thing, that they were dead keen for it as well. It was their home series. I think they held the Ashes and had done sort of all during COVID. So, they were keen to win it again on their home territory. And, it was. There's a real desire amongst our guys to do well, and we did. It was a good spirit between the players. It was excellent, both on and off the pitch. There was a lot of respect there, but it was played hard. I mean, the Aussie skipper Tom Wood, really good player, but he wasn't a walker. 2 or 3 times during the not just the series, but he played 1 or 2 of the warm-up games as well. He nicked off big time. Didn't walk, and the umpire apparently didn't hear it. And, just sort of carried on. And, we were talking after the game, and he made no bones about it. He said, yeah, of course I touched it. He said, but that's what the umpire's for. I'm not going to do his job for him. And you think, fair enough, that's where you are, and you have to accept that. But there was a little bit of karma in there, Stephen, in that in one of the warm-up games between the first and second test, Tom was opening the batting, and as I said, he nicked off big time and wasn't given, and we couldn't believe it. About 3 balls later, he went to play a shot and pulled his groin rather badly. Had to go off the pitch. Didn't play again in the match, and only about 5 days away from the second test, and we all thought that was his race run, but. No, Tom turned up. He went out and batted in the next test, and he wasn't fit. Far from it. He struggled in the field, and he got 20 odd in quite a long time, and but he was really struggling. And come the last game, he opened again, was really struggling, and he was pulling up with his groin, and we thought, well, whatever happens here, we said. He's not going to have a runner, he's not. He's coming to the game with an injury, and I think that's what the stipulation is these days. You can have a runner if you do an injury during the game. Anyway, after about 15, 20 overs, a runner walked out to bat, and we looked at one another and said, "Well, hang on a sec, he can't be doing that." And so the skipper went up and had a word with the umpires, and there was a bit of a conflab. And Tom had convinced the umpires, rightly or wrongly, I don't know, that it wasn't his groin, he'd pulled the other groin, not that one, and so he'd be entitled to a runner. And we're thinking, well, hang on, the only reason he's pulled the other groin, if it was the other groin, is that he's been carrying this injury and running on one leg, and of course the other leg's going to sort of complain and give way. But hey ho, it didn't make much difference. He was out in the next over, and that was that. But just little things like that meant that they were dead up for it and wanted to win desperately, and it worked out okay in the end for us anyway.
Well, let's hear, you mentioned him, let's hear what Paul had to say about playing against England in an Ashes series.
We're pretty competitive against New Zealand, but it's like playing your cousin. But when you play England, it's like knocking off your big brother. You want to beat your big brother, want to rough him up a bit. You're the benchmark, and we do. We do want to beat you. Absolutely.
On the tour, you also met former Australian Test opener of the 1970s and 1980s, Rick McCosker, at one of the games.
Yes, indeed. It was at Newcastle, and both the teams were. It'd been arranged to have an evening at a local pub, all get together the day before the game, have a meal, and make a bit of an occasion of it. And that was where I met Paul for the first time. I hadn't seen him for a number of years, and Paul came up to me and we had a nice chat. Just for a moment, I couldn't place him, and he said, "Oh, hello, Nick, good to see you." And I think, "Oh," and then of course the penny dropped, and we sort of carried on again. And anyway, when we got there at the pub, we all came off the bus and went in there and started mingling with some of the opposition who we didn't really know. Paul wasn't amongst them at the time, but there were 2 or 3 guys who said, "Oh yeah, come and have a chat. Oh, I'm Ray. This is Don. This is Rick. Blah 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 blah," and chatting away. And I had no idea it was Rick McCosker at the time. It was just that when we sat down and had a meal, and we sat on the same table as them, and we're having a bit of a chat. And someone said to me, "You see, you know that's Rick McCosker, Nick, don't you?" I said, "Oh, blimey!" I said, "It's Rick McCosker. Is that?" I said in a bit of a loud voice, I said, "Is that the guy who had a nappy wrapped round his face when he got sort of his jaw broken by Bob Willis?" And kind of he heard that and sort of we had a little bit of a laugh about it, and just carried on and did a little bit of Anglo-Australian joshing as you tend to do, and he took it really well, and it was a nice evening, and he was very hospitable and very, very generous with his time, and he sort of came to the game, came to the ODI a few days later, and I think he made some presentations beforehand as well, which was just fantastic, and it was a pleasure to have met the guy.
Well, I had the great pleasure of speaking to Rick on this podcast on 2 or 3 occasions, and this is what Paul also had to say about meeting the famous Australian Open of the 1970s and 1980s.
Rick came along and presented the Baggy Blues to the New South Wales side, which was an honour in itself, and then stayed to talk to the England players. And it was a big thrill for them to meet this grand man who'd held up England in that centenary test, and such a humble fellow. Does great work with the disadvantaged in Newcastle, and just he's got a very good life balance. He's been a great of cricket, but he's a human being of the highest calibre. That's all I can say.
And in August this year, the Australians are back in England to try and win back those Ashes. What do you think their chances of winning them back are?
Nil. Well, no, a bit of bravado there, but I'd like to think that at home with possibly a slightly stronger side than we took to Australia, that we've got the Ashes at the moment, and we want to hang on to them, and we'll be sort of going hell for leather to do that in the summer.
You must be looking forward to it. Where are the games being played?
I'm not too sure. I haven't seen the itinerary, sort of, Stephen, but I believe they're sort of regional. Then I think there's one in the north. There's going to be one sort of Midlands and one in the sort of southwest area. So to give perhaps 1 or 2 people a chance to play in their regions rather than have to have a lot of travelling, which is what some of the poor Australian guys had to do in our series. They think nothing of driving 5 or 6 hours for the game, which wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea, but they were only too happy to have done it, of course. But getting back to this summer, I think it'll be a good series. I feel sure that they're going to be a bit stronger as well, because there might be one or two new faces after a home defeat. I'm sure that'll happen, and they'll be as keen and as eager as ever. But so will we.
Well, Paul hopes to be there, and this is what he had to say about Ashes 2023 in England.
We've got to do some things better. We've got to get ourselves fitter. There were niggling injuries in games 2 and 3. People were carrying injuries, and it told in the end. And I feel that we've got to have more competitive national titles where our Division 1, when we compete, Victoria plays New South Wales, plays Queensland particularly, where it's modelled on an ODI, where, you unlimited batting, like the ODIs are played, where you model your Division 1 on a future ODI, so that we're better prepared for those match conditions over 50 overs. And the fact that we just can't afford to bowl one bad ball in an over. It's that close. England do the little things so brilliantly well, and that makes all the difference in a series.
And are you hoping to be there yourself?
Yes, I am. I think I've got something to offer, and fitness, let alone fitness, but I think I've got a desire to win those back. I didn't like the way it ended. I didn't like any team winning by 8 wickets, Stephen. It wasn't something. It's not preferable. Yeah. So yes, I am hopeful.
I spoke to Paul and posed him the question, "What's Nick like?" Now you'll hear that shortly, but what's Paul like, Nick?
Oh, he's a really, really, really nice guy. Generous, very, very, very personable, and the kind of guy you like to play cricket with, really. It embodies the mateship of playing England and Australia. He's as tough as anyone on the pitch and wants to do really well. But afterwards, he'd be the first guy to buy you a drink and introduce you to his wife, and she was charming as well. Kim, lovely lady. And really enjoyed meeting him again and catching up. It was absolute pleasure on and off the pitch.
He asked me to ask you, why do you think that his John Arlott impersonation, the famous commentator, was rubbish?
Well, for starters, no one quite knew that he was trying to imitate John Arlott, and the second was that it was rubbish.
Oh, that's put him in his place. And this is what he had to say. What was Nick like?
Yes. Look, he's a laugh. I first met him in 2012 when we played at Lutterworth in Lincolnshire. He got me out, in fact. He had me stumped.
You haven't forgotten?
And he had forgotten, and I've never forgotten it. But we had a good yarn at the lunch break, and got to know him pretty well. And then he came back in 2019, I think, for a tour. I played him in Canberra, and in this one, it was really good to see him again. And he and I share a love of the English comedian Tommy Cooper. We're both great fans of it. He's our favourite comic, and most of the evening at Coogee, when we had the dinner after the game, was doing comedy routines, and much of the chagrin of our wives. I don't know that they were so amused, but he's a terrible heckler as well. I was doing my speech as MC that night, and I was doing a John Arlott impersonation. We talked before about that match at 1972 with Bob Massey. I did that commentary, the John Arlott commentary from Manchester, and my wife at the end said to Nick, "What do you think of that?" And he went, "It's rubbish." So no, I wasn't. I think it's a bit harsh, a bit harsh for a guest. but he's a great fellow, and he's the type of bloke that you need on tour. You know, he's a very skilled cricketer, but he's so sociable, and he's always up, and you need that over a long tour.
And I guess that's what over 70s cricket or seniors cricket is all about.
Yes, it is. There's the friendships as well as the competition, of course. Yes. And I met his wife, Sally, for the first time this time, and that was good. That's good.
I've got one question, actually, from a friend of ours, Pat Ringham, the chairman, fixture secretary and manager of the Cams and Hunts over 70s team. He seemed to do everything for the over 70s. And he asked me to ask you, did you say, let's get busy to other batsmen when you were batting?
No, I didn't. I reserve that particular comment for when I'm batting with Pat, because most of the guys I batted with in Australia were sort of very up to speed and were able to get busy and get the scoreboard moving pretty quickly. It's just that when I bat with Pat, I just have to remind him that we're not playing in a test match and we need to score fairly quickly.
Oh, that certainly put Pat in his place, but we've got to mention for the chairman, the fixture secretary and the manager, he does an awful lot for Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire cricket, though. Pat
is an absolute legend, and I don't think we wouldn't have a sort of 60s and 70s side, but for his administration and all the hard work he does, which probably goes unappreciated by a lot of people. But you know, he's absolute legend, is Pat, and you know, I've got the utmost respect for the guy deep down.
To end the show, though, you must be delighted to have won the Ashes in Australia and to have toured Australia. The camaraderie and going on tour must have been fantastic.
As I say, probably one of the high spots of my entire life, Stephen. It was fantastic. Loved every minute of it. Loved every aspect of it. Even the long travels on the coach, which were a little bit daunting at times, but you know, happy days, and wouldn't have missed it for the world. And just so lucky that, you know, I've been in the right place at the right time to be able to take advantage of these kind of opportunities, which you know, I'm very proud of now, and I'm sure I will be when I look back at when I finally call time on my career. But can I just briefly add up to that a little bit, Stephen?
Certainly. Yeah,
we were. I think before the second ODI, we had a game at a place called Tamworth. We didn't actually play it in the end. We got rained off, and beforehand there was a social, and there was meant to be a T20 game going on in the morning, not involving us, and then we were playing a day nighter in the afternoon. And in the T20 game that preceded our game was going to be a guy who was playing for the New South Wales side, Doug. I forget what his second name was, Doug, and he's 93 years old. And when someone told me about it, I said, "You're joking, 93? No, yeah." He said, "Come and meet him. He's just over here." So wow. So I had a word with two or three of the guys, and we went round and had a chat with this guy, Doug. Lovely bloke. He was, you know, full of it and looking forward to playing the next day. And you know, I was quite in awe. I said, "Doug, you're 23 years older than me, and I think I've probably been playing 20 years too old." And he said, "No, I'll keep on." He said, "I don't drink too much." He said, "I don't smoke, and I just sort of get on with it." I said to him, I said, "Doug, 93. I said, just out of interest, what's the highest score that you've made since you turned 90? And he said, "Oh, I got 96, he said, "but no one told me I was on 96, and I got out to a bad shot. I was furious." I was at 96 when you're not. I just, you know, mind-boggling that someone at that age can still sort of get by. And we were all looking forward to seeing him play the next day, but sadly, the rain intervened. But wow, that was an experience, I must confess.
Well, you've got years to go now. Then there's not an England over 80s team, but there's there's a chance for you there.
No.
Keep fit. Thank you very much for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion, and keep those Ashes when the Australians come over here in August 2023.
Certainly will, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at The Pad and Pad. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.